Tonight, people have once again gathered in Ferguson, this time for a candlelight vigil that has just ended, where last night in Ferguson, 2 police officers were shot. Neither of the wounded police officers were with the Ferguson Police Department. Officials have withheld their names. One of the police officers is a 32-year-old member of the Webster Groves Police Department. The other is a 41-year-old member of St. Louis County Police Department.
The Webster Groves officer is shot right here at the high point of your cheek, right under the right eye, and the bullet lodges right behind his ear. And that bullet is still with him. He's going to have further evaluation to figure out what they're going to do with that round. The St. Louis County officer was struck right here on the shoulder, and the bullet came out the middle of his right back, between the scapula and his spine.
Both officers were released from the hospital this morning. An intense manhunt is underway for last night's shooter. This morning, a house in Ferguson was raided by police who took into custody 3 people who were in that house. They were questioned for approximately 6 hours and then released. No arrests have been made. This morning, President Obama tweeted this: "Violence against police is unacceptable. Our prayers are with the officers in Missouri. Path to justice is one all of us must travel together." Signed, B.O. U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder strongly condemned the attacks this afternoon.
What happened last night was a pure ambush. This was not someone trying to bring healing to Ferguson. This was a damn punk who was trying to sow discord in an area that is trying to get its act together and trying to bring together a community that has been fractured for too long.
St. Louis Police Chief John Belmar said this:
"My officers tell me that when this happened, when they heard the shots and when they heard the bullets singing past, that they saw muzzle flashes. But these muzzle flashes were probably about 125 yards away. Many officers drew their weapons, but no officers fired. I'm going to be honest with you, this is beginning at times to be very difficult for any law enforcement agency anywhere to really wrap their arms around. I want everybody here to understand how difficult this is to do it the exact perfect way."
Michael Brown's family condemned last night's shooting, saying, "We reject any kind of violence directed toward members of law enforcement. It cannot and will not be tolerated." Joining me now from Ferguson, Missouri, are MSNBC's Tremaine Lee and DeRay McKesson, a Ferguson activist who was at the scene when 2 officers were shot last night. Also joining us by phone is Missouri Congressman Emanuel Cleaver. Quickly to you, Tremaine, what is the situation there now?
I'll tell you what, just moments ago, a vigil of about 100 or so people ended, and protesters marched down Florissant chanting, "No justice, no peace," and so many of the other chants we've heard. But like so many other proverbial day afters, here we are again in Ferguson with folks trying to sift through the pieces, figure out what's what, protesters and police bracing, and how do you pivot from here? Throughout the day, community leaders have been meeting to try to figure out a way to minimize the harm here. And so I was actually, interesting enough, a resident stopped me in the grocery store, schnucks down the street, and said he's confused. Chief Belmer says that this shooter was embedded with the protesters, but then the fire happened 125 yards away. And so there's still so much confusion here, and everyone is still, again, just trying to pick up the pieces and figure out what's what.
DeRay McKesson, could you tell us what you witnessed last night during the shooting?
Yeah, so what I heard were about 4 shots that went off, and I saw the police officer fall, and when the police officer fell, another officer went around to him and called the ambulance. And then the rest of the officers hid behind whatever they could hide behind, and they drew their weapons. And then about 5 minutes later, a group of officers went to the hill where the shots were, and I was at the bottom of the hill, so I heard the shots. I looked to where the shots came from. I didn't see anything up there. I didn't see a car or a person or these lights that people speak about. But that is what happened. And what I know to be true is that the hill is not a space where the protesters stay in. It's not where we ever congregate. It's not where we park. It just isn't a place where protesters are.
And DeRay, were there any discussions with your group and the activists involved about not gathering tonight for safety reasons?
Yeah, no, the protests have been going strong for 216 days now, and to not protest tonight would feed into this idea that less protest means less violence. And the reality is that the violence was here before the protests began. You think about Mike Brown was killed before anybody protested, so we're out here protesting police violence, and that has been around for a long time. You think about the 7 people that have been killed by the St. Louis police since August, and that's why we're still out here.
We're seeing live imagery of people gathered outside of the Ferguson police station right now. Joined on the phone now by Representative Emanuel Cleaver. And Congressman Cleaver, I know you've posted reward money in the hope of aiding with an arrest in this shooting case. But I want to go to the question of tactics, and you're a veteran of the civil rights movement yourself. And I'm wondering about what your reaction is to the idea of being out there at night when we now know that there were, at least last night, was a shooter who was using the protesters as cover to try to kill police officers, and it's just a matter of luck that those police officers are still alive.
Well, first of all, I'm glad the police officers are going to be survivors of this, but let's keep in mind the people who did this are hoodlums. They are low-class hoodlums, and as we celebrate and commemorate the 50th anniversary of the March Across the Edmund Pettus Bridge down in Selma, just think about how far behind we might still be had some snipers started shooting at the Sheriff Clark and others the night after the march. It's just unthinkable that someone would consider themselves to be helpful to any cause by shooting at police officers. And Congressman Lacy Clay and I put up $3,000, and we are willing to go out and raise more money to increase the money that would be given to anyone who would provide information to the arrest and conviction of individuals who participated in that shooting. We can't allow this to go on. Racial tension in this country is perhaps at a higher level than it's been since the mid-1970s, maybe even back into the 60s. And this racial tension is, my grandmother did embroidery, and this is kind of like embroidery. The only way we make progress is stitch by stitch, and not bowing down to the people who are creating this problem. And the best thing that can happen is for us to turn them in and get them arrested. Whoever knows anything about it ought to turn them in.
Congressman Cleaver,
I think one part that's interesting about this, and I've seen these protesters and I've seen these organizations kind of mature over the last 7 months, and a lot of it is about how they continue to wrestle with the narrative. Now, for the greater part of 7 months, the protesters have been overwhelmingly peaceful, but as the congressman said, it takes one instance to kind of change the narrative and give fuel to those who are already opposing what you all have been doing for so long anyway. And so how do you, as protesters, as people who are fueling this movement for Black lives and for justice, how do you pivot from that? I guess, DeRay, I want to ask you, how do you all pivot and make sure you regain the narrative under such circumstances, which, to a person, no one has appreciated the violence against the police last night?
Yeah. So the thing is that we know very few things about what happened last night. We know that there were shots fired, and we know that police officers were hit. Besides that, we don't know anything else. Belmar's remarks last night saying that the shooter was embedded in the protest community was dangerous language and was indicative of his inability to lead what we believe should be like thoughtful policing, right? Like, who makes statements like that without any evidence, without talking to any witnesses? What we know to be true is that what was true yesterday is true today, that this is a place that like racist policing has been proven not only by lived experience but by the Department of Justice, right? Like, we know those things to still be true, and we believe that that is enough to get the movement back on track. There was an effort to derail us in August with the QT burning. There were efforts when some other things happened, and we've remained solid throughout those. And we anticipate that we'll remain solid because the work that we're doing around justice is just so real.
Is there something to be said, though, that you have a phalanx of officers who are receiving fire in the middle of the dark, from the darkness? They see muzzle flashes coming from behind protesters. Can you imagine the circumstance where police officers might not know and might truly believe that there are gunmen embedded, to use Chief Belmer's words, embedded with you all?
Yeah, and we don't condone violence, right?
So that is the danger. I mean, for the people of goodwill around this country right now, and including the protesters, I know many of them. I've had an opportunity to sit down with DeRay. And these are good and decent people who have the right to go out and protest. But let's think, if one of the police officers, just one, had begun to fire, it probably would have somehow triggered more fire from police. And we could be talking about a massacre that is the result of some coward.
Right, but let's be clear that there has been a massacre, right?
From up on a hill.
But there has been a massacre. The police killed 302 black people.
DeRay, I know you're critical of what the police chief had to say last night in his instant analysis of what happened, but do you feel critical of the way the police responded, tactically responded in that moment to being fired upon and two of them being hit?
No, the police responded. The police response last night was a very solid response, and it was indicative of what I believe policing should be. They showed restraint. They were really methodical in the way they moved up the hill. Their response was solid last night.
Congressman Cleaver, I just want to get a last word from you. With your experience in the protest movement, the civil rights movement, what would you recommend tactically now to DeRay and other people interested in how to represent their position going forward in Ferguson? I mean, would you, for example, suggest a moratorium on nighttime protesting for a while? Any tactical change you would suggest?
Well, I think that any advice that we give is probably going to be viewed as advice from the previous generation. But I do think that it would be of great value, a significant value for the protesters to begin to notify police of who they are and where they're going to be, because I think the police, whether they are doing it out of love or whatever, are trying to exercise restraint, or we would have had a really bad situation last night. So, and it wouldn't hurt to have John Lewis fly into Ferguson and do a nonviolent protest lesson for them and for many other individuals as well. It takes a great deal of courage to be nonviolent.
John Lewis did make a statement today, very similar to the president's, advocating absolute nonviolence in all such situations. I'm sorry to all of you, we're out of time on this segment. Thank you all for joining me tonight. Tremaine Lee, DeRay McKesson, and Congressman Emanuel Cleaver, thank you very much. Coming up.